Hey, welcome into the Stinkin Truth Podcast. Mark Schlereth alongside Mike Evans. And I'll tell you what, Mike, I am so ready because
I forgot about that.
Right off the bat, things are good right now. We've got so much to talk about. We'll make our picks later, and our moneymaker picks sure to go wrong. I am absolutely whipping your behind in the picks, but we'll get to that later in the podcast. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this weekend. There's some real intriguing matchups, and I want to start with Buffalo, because it would seem to me that everything's in front of Buffalo this week, hosting Kansas City, to show that they really do belong in the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go back through the regular season, Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen is 3-1 in those regular season matchups. But what happens in the playoffs? In the playoffs, he's 0-3. So it really becomes, even if you win this game, how much do you really learn about your football team during a regular season game in which you're 3-1 against the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season? So, it's one of those situations where I look at it, is it a revenge game? People say, hey, revenge for the playoff game last year. No, that doesn't really work. That's not really a thing. They have proven that they can beat and play with the Kansas City Chiefs, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. So would it be nice to win? Absolutely. It'd be nice to win. But in the overall scheme of things, unless this is January, it really doesn't matter. A game in November doesn't matter. A game in January does.
Okay. I guess the only pushback I'll give you on that is that is it a little bit different because the Bills are kind of different this year, not only in the way that they're made up, but also in the way that Josh Allen is playing. Here's a guy who routinely over the last several years has been double digits when it comes to interceptions. This year, he's thrown only 4. Yeah, he went a stretch of over, 300 passes without throwing an interception. So the fact that he's different this year, does that?
Sure. I think all those I think all those things factor in. The other thing I think is they're a more complete team. Before it was always about, hey, we've got Stephon Diggs and we've got Gabe Davis, I think is the other receiver's name that was a player there. And then we've got a couple of tight ends and we're going to throw the ball and we're going to spread you out. And we're not really going to, we're putting it all on Josh Allen. And this year, by far, Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, it's by far the most balanced, the most run, pass efficiency that they've had. So I think it does. And, my biggest question mark come playoff time with the Buffalo Bills has been their propensity as a coaching staff to just say, hey, Josh, go win this thing. Mm-hmm. Where you look at their past matchups against the Chiefs. At the half, they're on average, they're 10 points ahead of the Chiefs. If you accumulate all the games together, they've got on average a 10-point lead against the Chiefs in the first half. They're minus 10 in the second half. So they're losing these close games, and the Chiefs are coming back, reeling them back in, and winning in the second half. And a lot of what I watch in the second half in critical moments, when the game's on the line, all of a sudden Kansas City Chiefs start making the run. They lean on Josh Allen. Go win it for us, Josh. Go make a play for us. And ultimately, what has happened in the past is Josh Allen has thrown some picks, some critical turnovers, some things that have happened to them. And that to me is more coaching than it had been Josh Allen. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how they match up from a coaching to coaching standpoint. I will say this. Go back to last week's Broncos game. And, this is such a copycat league. And anytime you have some success doing things, other teams are going to try to take, if it fits what they do and it fits their personnel, they'll take that and go, okay, let me see if we can devise a plan based upon what the Broncos did to Kansas City last week and see if we can do something that mimics that we can have success with. And you go back to the Broncos game last week defensively, and I thought there was a couple things they did exceptionally well. Is they really brought pressure in everything they did. They played a lot of man-to-man coverage, but even when they were in zone, they brought an extra pressure guy. Meaning, so if you're dropping back with 7 guys in coverage normally in zone and 4 rushers, they're bringing an extra guy to rush. So they're bringing an extra linebacker, meaning one of their underneath zones is vacated. right? One guy has to cover two zones, but they did it on a consistent basis, Mike, and they did a really good job of bringing pressure. And it was probably the first time I've actually seen Patrick Mahomes get so sped up in the pocket that there was a couple of throws that he could have made that would have been touchdown throws where he got off that read because he felt that pressure. And even when there wasn't pressure, you could see that he was sped up and he got off those reads. He had a touchdown in the corner of the end zone. They ended up settling for a field goal that he was on it. I watched him watch the guy. I watched him get off of it because his clock in his head was sped up. And then he got off that and the guy comes wide open and they drop coverage. And it was a touchdown. So there's a couple of those things that happen. Can the Buffalo Bills implement not only the coverage scheme, the blitz scheme, but also creating some different fronts? And that's one of the things that the Broncos did. Zach Allen, who's their best defensive lineman, there was probably close to a dozen times, Mike, where he was lined up as a stand-up player, a stand-up nose guard. He was lined up and they were running games using him as the looper in some of those games. Sometimes he was the pincher or the scraper where he's trying to trade double teams and looping a linebacker around. But they did a lot of things from a front standpoint that made it very difficult to ID the defense. And as an offensive lineman, man, when I can't ID the defense, when I'm not sure what exactly it is, it slows down our calls. It slows down what we want to accomplish up front. And those things are hard. So, there is a potential blueprint. I don't know if the Bills can take from that and execute. We'll see. But that was something the Broncos did really well against Kansas City to really slow that offense down.
All right. Definitely looking forward to that game. Also, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. I know Pittsburgh's accomplished a lot to this point, and I'm not trying to completely blow off what they've done, but they haven't played a division game yet. And so in many respects, does the Steelers season kind of start for real now?
Yeah, it's interesting because Mike Tomlin addressed it in the press and he was great. He's typical Mike Tomlin. He goes, I don't give jack squat about where we play, who we play, when we play them, line them up. We'll play them all as they come. And, you look at the Baltimore Ravens, Mike, and this will blow you away. I don't know if you know this or not. So what do you think the Baltimore Ravens record is against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the last 10 matchups? So the last 10 times they've played, what would you say the Ravens record is facing the Pittsburgh Steelers? And remember, this is Ben Roethlisberger at the end of his career. This is Ben Roethlisberger at the end of his career. This is Mason Rudolph. Yeah. This is Kenny Pickett. This isn't a who's who of Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks. So what do you think their record is over the last 10 times they've played?
Yeah, I guess you're kind of leading the witness here a little bit. I'm going to say 4-6.
3-7.
Wow. Okay.
And what do you think Lamar Jackson's record is against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Now, he's only played 4 games against the Steelers in his career, which is odd, right?
Yeah.
He missed a couple of seasons where he missed 2 games with either COVID or sickness or whatever, right? And then a couple of times they've been at the end of the football season where Baltimore has had things locked up so they didn't have to play him. Okay. But what do you think his record is against the Pittsburgh Steelers? 4 games.
1-3?
1-3.
1-3. Wow.
1-3 against the Steelers. So, there's something to styles make fights. There's something to a confidence level that the Pittsburgh Steelers have when they face the Baltimore Ravens. This is not the same Ravens team. Offensively, they're a juggernaut. Offensively, they're exceptional, as you well know. Defensively, they've been the worst pass coverage team in football. And, it's really interesting. Like, the one thing that I would do, Mike, just from a game planning standpoint, is I think as an offense with Pittsburgh, you look at the one guy that will wreck your game. You look at the one guy that will wreck your entire game plan. It's number 90, TJ Watt. Mm-hmm. And I would load that son of a bitch as many times as I could load that son of a bitch. I'd hit him in the lips as many times as I could. I would run everything directly at him. Make him defend, make him stop his feet, make him take away some of his athleticism, and I would run at him as many times as I can. So I'm running fullback load on his ass, right? I'm running tight end tackle double team on his ass. I'm running guard trap on his ass. I'm running like short motion from the opposite side and running pin pull with a tight end, hit him in the ear hole on his. Like I am doing as much as I can. Put Patrick Ricard. Now Patrick Ricard is probably he's close to being my favorite player in the National Football League. Maybe he's my favorite player. So this is a former defensive lineman. He's 6'3". He's 315 pounds. He plays fullback. The dude is an absolute beast. He's one of those dudes that weighs 315 and has abs. You know, he's just he's a freak show. Like how many dudes you know that are 315 and have abs and veins in their stomach, right? Like, how is that even possible, dude? Like, what's the mixture? Give me some. I need some. Whatever you're on, give me that. I want to take that. Like, what is it? Is it diet? Is it like, are you just a freak? Are you not from this planet? So I would put that hammerhead on TJ Watt as much as I could, and I would load his ass. I would hit him in the lips as many times as I could. I would try to slow him down from a pass rushing standpoint because TJ Watt is a absolute freak of nature, great football player, football playing Jesse. So it's one of the ways I would try to combat that matchup advantage that the Pittsburgh Steelers have every time they line up every Sunday.
I know it was a topic of conversation on your TV show Breakfast Ball on FS1 all week with what's going on with the Bears and the idea that some players inside that Bears locker room reportedly would love to see them make a switch at quarterback. At this point, might it not be the worst thing? Almost kind of give Caleb Williams a chance to kind of clear his head a little bit because it might be the right thing for him right now, or do you just continue to stay out there, play through it?
Yeah, they already made the change at offensive coordinator. You know, they said, hey, we fired our offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron. Some would say, hey, did you fire him because he's not a good offensive coordinator, or did Caleb Williams get him fired because he's playing so poorly? Now they've promoted Thomas Brown, who was the former offensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers last year, who got demoted as the offensive coordinator. He was a passing game coordinator. So a new guy calling plays. It didn't have success the first go around in Carolina when he got that opportunity. And then you've got guys like DJ Moore that in the middle of a play against the Arizona Cardinals walked off the football field and sat on the bench while his quarterback's scrambling around trying to make a play. Like what? Like seriously, what? And there was no punishment, as far as we know, that was doled out to DJ Moore. You walked off the football field. It has been intimated that through players out there like Keenan Allen and some of the other guys that there's been a lack of attention to detail under Shane Waldron since OTAs. There's been a lack of holding guys accountable, a lack of responsibility taking in Chicago since that time. DJ Moore has the captain on his chest. He was voted a captain. And that dude walks off the football field, and the next week he shows up and he starts a game and he still has the C on his chest. That's institutional failure. And I would tell you this, they've had several they've got this players council, this bullshit that, all the teams, let's have the players council and let's go in here and let's, have a conversation with Matt Eberflus and really talk this thing out. Let's hash it out. Right. And it's one thing to point out a problem. It's another thing to do something about that problem.
Right.
Right. You could sit there and say, hey, man, these trash cans are overflowing. Like somebody's got to move this trash out of here. And then you just sit around as your whole locker room smells like a turd and nobody does anything. Well, guess what? You still have the problem. You've identified it, but you haven't made any actionable move toward it. And so from my standpoint, the players are the ones that have to go out and play. It's our team. And I've told you this many times. In 1997, the Denver Broncos having a couple game losing streak, not playing very well. And I was on IR at the time, coming off of IR. I was coming off of I don't know. I actually didn't go on IR, but I was coming off a back injury. I had back surgery. I was coming back to practice. And I had just been watching kind of like a fly on the wall. And I'm watching guys show up late. I'm watching guys, showing up late to special teams meetings, doing whatever, right? Just a lack of attention to detail. And so I told Mike Shanahan, I'm going to call a meeting. Right. And he goes, and I just want a players only meeting. Well, of course, the coaches go out of the room and they all run upstairs because Mike had everything wired. So, everything was on closed circuit TV. So they could watch the meeting. So I addressed the team and basically say, to the effect of, hey, listen, when you show up late to anything, what you're saying is that your time is more valuable than my time, that your family's more important than my family. And that's bullshit. We're not going to win anything with that being the attitude of this football team. And ultimately I said, and I did say this on the closed circuit TV, I go, you guys act like this is Mike Shanahan's football team. This isn't Mike Shanahan's football team. I said, to get Mike Shanahan, if Mike Shanahan had to put on pads, I go, you'd need a smoke bomb to get him out of the locker room. And once you got him out of the locker room, he'd be standing in a puddle of piss. He'd be so afraid. This is our football team. People don't come to watch Mike Shanahan stand around his ass off on the sideline. They come to watch us play. It is our football team, and you're letting us down. And the fact the Chicago Bears can point this out from OTAs and not do anything about it, not ultimately, there's an old saying that a fish rots from the head down or smells from the head, right? The bottom line is, listen, Matt Eberflus makes a gaffe in that Washington game. He doesn't cover the sideline, and he lets Washington throw an easy 13-yard out, which gives them the opportunity to throw the Hail Mary. And they ask him, was that a coaching gaffe? Was that a mistake? He's like, that had no bearing on the Hail. My ass, it didn't have a bearing on the Hail Mary. It gave you the opportunity to get all the way down to the end zone. And it was still 3 yards short. So you tell me if you take that 13 yards away, it's coming down to the 15-yard line. It's not gonna happen. And if the head coach is unwilling to take responsibility for the dumpster fire that Chicago Bears are, then how are the players going to take responsibility? How's anybody going to hold themselves accountable? It's just an abject disaster. And this is one of the great matchups in NFL history, right? The oldest rivalry, Chicago Bears versus Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers, Xavier McKinney is talking smack on DJ Moore, saying, I ain't never seen that. Dude walked out in the middle of a play. His quarterback's run around for his life. Dude just walked out. I ain't never seen it. This is a great rivalry, and we're talking about the dysfunction of the Chicago Bears. Dude, how do you let it get to this point, Mike?
Great analysis. I got two questions coming out of your Denver Broncos story back in the day. One, did Mike Shanahan ever later on admit that he heard what you had to say?
No, but George Dyer was our defensive line coach. I love George Dyer. Great human being. And so later on that morning, we break for meetings and stuff. And I'm in the training room grabbing something, whatever it is I'm grabbing. And George Dyer comes up to me and goes, dude. And I'm like, what? He goes, you got balls. And I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, dude, we're all huddled around the cameras in Mike's office. And you started going after Mike. And we were all like, as coach, we were like, oh. He's like, I can't believe you said it. And of course, I didn't even think about those cameras. I wasn't even thinking. I was just just speaking from my heart. But he was like, as soon as you brought up Mike Shanahan's, all of our eyes got really big. We were all all leaning back from the camera, kind of getting away from Mike. Because Mike, he looked like Fire Marshal Bill. His whole head was red, about ready to explode. Right. And so, he was like, oh, dude, you got balls.
Second question is, that, of course, was the year you guys went on to win the Super Bowl. So I want to know, when is the statue of Mark Schlereth going to be erected outside the Broncos Stadium for saving that season and turning that whole season around?
I'm single-handedly responsible for winning that Super Bowl. There's no question about it. Had I not done that, had I not come back and had this gallant return from a back surgery 27 days after I had 2 discs removed from my back and just led the way. We'd have never won that championship. So there should be a statue.
The speech turned everything around.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a full statue, Mike. It could just be a little miniature statue. Yeah. Like a little Heisman. Yeah. Like if I got my own little Heisman and it was it was cemented in so nobody stole it, right? But it was cemented in a little Heisman there, and it had me with the Heisman pose or whatever, or like doing this. Wait a minute.
Oh, it's not doing it.
Wait, was that it? That wasn't it? Oh, there it is. Little Heisman joke. What happens if I go like this?
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Anything?
Nothing there.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but right now I got this going on over there. This is what's happening to me. They're not recognizing. Wait a minute. They're not. I was too close. They're not recognizing. They're not recognizing the greatness that is me, and therefore it's raining on my parade, Mike.
Folks. There you go. Some insight into the specialness that is one Mark Schlereth. Hey, I know that when it comes to the Shanahans, this is actually a perfect segue. Thank you. That you're almost kind of like an adopted son in many ways, and it's reflected in the nice things you tend to say about the San Francisco 49ers. But does it just seem to you that something's off there? Something seems just to be missing.
Yeah. You know what, Mike? It's been interesting. You know, they've had the injury issues, and so they're missing that. Obviously, Ayuk is out for the season. They've had, McCaffrey just came back last week. There's been a lack of continuity, and part of it, I think, is the McCaffrey effect. Like, they have not been scoring in the red zone. And McCaffrey is one of those guys that is so interchangeable and so good at catching the ball out of the backfield, but from multiple positions. So one of the things that they haven't been able to do is they haven't been able to create those mismatches in the passing game with their running backs, because Jordan Mason is not that guy. Like, I went back through the film and looked at every catch he's made. Every catch that he's made has come directly out of the backfield. He's been in the backfield. He's never been split out anywhere because he doesn't have that skill set where Christian McCaffrey, if you remember going back to the draft, there were some teams that said, hey, Christian should transition to be a slot receiver. And so when Christian is in there, he can motion outside of the backfield. He can be in the slot. He can be outside wide, outside the numbers. But he and Deebo Samuel become interchangeable parts. And so that can be a very effective way to put those guys in the backfield. And then you start opening up packages with like a Mason and a Christian McCaffrey in the same backfield, right? And now all of a sudden defense coordinators have to decide, hey, how are we going to play this? Are we going to play this like a base where we bring in an extra linebacker, or we can play it like nickel where we keep DBs in there? And then San Francisco can say accordingly, hey, if they make it nickel, we're just going to run it down your throat. If you make it base, we're going to throw it over your head. Right. So there is those things that they haven't had. And so I'm assuming that's going to get better as time goes on. But let's talk about Deebo Samuel going after Tabor Pepper, their deep snapper, and the kicker, Moon. Is it Mooney? Mooney, right? Moody. Yeah, let's talk about that. Him going after those guys. Like, listen, man, I've seen a lot of things on a sideline, and I've seen a lot of things in practice. And I think people would be shocked at how many times little skirmishes break out in practice. And it happens all the time. You've covered the Broncos. Mm-hmm. You've covered football teams. You've seen it. It happens. Oh, yeah. It's just the way it is. We used to have a fine, as a matter of fact. So when we'd be doing one-on-ones, like that period, right? And so it's shot pretty tight from behind the offensive line, to the defensive line. And so, the backups would be in, and we'd be over by the water bottle drinking water. We'd be 10, 12 yards away from the action. If a fight broke out in that drill, the film guys were told, as soon as fights break out, cut the film off. Right? Because we don't want that film out there. So as soon as a fight breaks out, like you see, there's always, it's hard to tell sometimes because you're you're going, and all of a sudden you break up, and all of a sudden somebody comes in with it, and then you get the first punch in, and then it starts going, and then they cut the film. So we had a rule: if you didn't make it into the framework of that fight on film, where you're ready to throw a haymaker against one of And these are our own guys, right?
Right.
But if you're not ready to throw a haymaker to one of the other defensive linemen and you don't get into that film before it gets shut off, you're getting fined. And I'm talking about big money. So like these are Neanderthal kind of things that, that type A personality dudes that play professional football are into. Like, we're into that kind of stuff. So I've seen that, I've had situations where I've been dog cussed by my offensive line coach up one side, down the other. I once tried to almost break his sternum. I knocked the wind out of him. I hit him in the chest with my helmet because he was pissing me off so bad. Like, these things happen. Like, luckily it wasn't caught on film. But, when somebody's sitting there with a Polaroid picture telling you suck and you did something wrong, and you're like, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. It's not what happened. And he's calling you a mother effing, sea-sucking, blah, 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 blah. And then I just took my helmet and I just rammed it right in his chest.
This was a rather older, diminutive person we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And you didn't care.
At that point, I was pissed off and he was wrong.
Yeah.
So I hit him in the chest and knocked the air out of him. And I like my helmet. I said, if you think you can block him, put my helmet on, be my guest. But if you can't block him, then get the fuck out of my face. Right? Because I'm the one that's blocking him. And so on my grade sheet the next day, I didn't say, hey, man, I'm sorry, or hey, let's talk about it. It just, all I said on the grade sheet was, you were right.
Oh, man, that must have been the best. That must have been
I'm like, there's no, I'm sorry. There's no like, hey, man, I you know what? I got overcooked or whatever. I shouldn't have said that stuff. No, it was just, you were right.
Well, that was probably felt better than any apology ever would have felt, right? So,
right. Well, that was his way of saying of saying he was sorry.
Here's my theory about San Francisco real quick. And tell me if you think I'm wrong. And maybe this is just the fan in me looking at it, but it's a 17-game season. They have had some injuries, but they play in a division that they know that is never going to get away from them. And I can't help but wonder if there's an element of sort of waiting to flip the switch with the 49ers.
I think that's fair, Mike. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time for them to really start to kind of cook on the offensive side of the ball. And I think the whole Debo thing, going after Tabor Pepper and going after the kicker, I think part of that is his own frustration with how poor they've been in the red zone. Like, they haven't scored, they haven't produced, they haven't done those things. And then all of a sudden their kicker misses 3 field goals, right? And that frustration is really on you. And ultimately, I've been in that situation. I was on the team when Bill Romanowski, and I know it's a different teammate, but I'm just using this as an example of how things get dealt with. So Bill Romanowski spits in Stokes' face, excuse me. It's a Sunday night game in San Francisco. We get our ass kicked, and Bill Romanowski spits in J.J. Stokes' face. And that was real. Like, there was guys that were really pissed, and it had a lot of racial undertones and everything else.
Yep.
And, we had Mike Shanahan brought us all in the team meeting, and we all sat there. And guys cleared the air. I mean, Shannon Sharp was really pissed. Shannon Sharp said some things about it. Some other guys said some things. And Bill Romanowski stood up, owned it all, and from the bottom of his heart apologized. And he apologized to J.J. Stokes. And Bill Romanowski, if you remember, he played in San Francisco. Yep. I think that's where he was drafted. So he played there as well. And, and at that point, we cleared the air. We talked about it all. Everybody said their piece. There were apologies. And then you know what we did? We moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, life happens, man. Sometimes things get carried away, and you never want to judge somebody on their worst moment or their best moment. Somewhere in between lies the truth. And so, Bill did a great job of apologizing. Everybody spoke their piece, and it was pretty heated for a little bit. And then at that point, it was like, hey, man, we're teammates, and we're after one thing only, to win a championship. So let's move on. Let's move forward.
Yeah, I've always thought that our society as a whole would be much better off if we could just resolve a lot of issues like teams.
Yeah. By the way, that was Mike Shanahan's team in 1997. It was the Denver Broncos. You know who was hanging around and holding Mike Shanahan's cord during games? Kyle Shanahan. He was there the whole time, and Kyle Shanahan was probably 12 or 13 at that time, maybe 14, whatever it was. So Kyle learned how to deal with things like this from Mike. So I guarantee you they had that, connection. I guarantee you they called a team meeting. He addressed it. He probably put the film on. And I'm sure that, Pepper spoke his piece. Debo got up and apologized. And you know what? And they kissed and made up, and it was all kumbaya. And, here we go.
Boy, you guys had a lot of stuff going on that 97 season. Even more reason why you deserve that statue.
It's a good call, Mike. Wait a minute.
Let's get to our.
Wait on. I want hold on, statue.
Hold on. Statue. Mark statue.
Come on.
Come on.
What is going on here?
Oh.
Statue. Oh, there it is. Yes. It's taking a little. There's a delay on this today, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on. All right, you ready to make your picks, buddy?
Yes.
All right.
If I must.
Okay, the picks are sure to go wrong, and just to remind,
not for you. I mean, listen to this man over here. He's been nailed this year. Just
to remind everybody where we are, because Mike and I have this great, what used to be a great competition. Right now, Mike, against the spread, we pick 3 games every week. Against the spread, Mike, you are 15-15. You are the definition of mediocrity, where yours truly is 29-1 against the spread. 20-9 -1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have got a resounding 5-game lead in the win column, but more importantly, a 6-game lead in the loss column, because you have told me time and time again how much more important the loss column is than the win column. Not sure 100% why, but you know what? I'm going with you on that. So anyhow, my picks. Right, are you ready for my picks?
Yep, go ahead.
Picks. Okay. I've got the Packers over the dumpster fire that is the Chicago Bears. The Packers 5.5-point favorites in Green Bay. I'll take them. I'll give the 5.5. And then I think this is a bounce back for the Lions. The Lions played flat. They didn't play well. They threw 5 picks, and they still found a way to win against Houston. This is a big, big spread. I don't really like it. But the Lions -14 over the Jags. I'm taking the Lions. I'm giving the points. This is redemption. This is get back on track offensively. This is Jared Goff throwing 0 incompletions and no interceptions. I think this is a big-time win. And then the last game, we just talked about the 49ers. They had their come-to-Jesus meeting. You know what? They kumbaya-ed it out. They hugged and kissed, and everything was great. I think they take on the Seahawks 6.5-point favorites. I'm giving the 6.5. I'm taking the 49ers.
All right, I'm going to answer the Chiefs. It's been a miraculous ride to this point, but you can't keep it going forever. You live on the edge. Eventually, you're going to fall off. I got Buffalo -2 at home against Kansas City. I like the Bengals. I think the Bengals are the team that probably everybody in the AFC is hoping does not make the playoffs. I think they are very dangerous, and the Chargers are good. I think the Bengals are better. I'm going to take Cincinnati on the road +1.5 against the Chargers. And I think the Dolphins are ready for a little bit of a run here. I'm going to take the Dolphins -7 over the Raiders.
I like both. I like both your Cincinnati and your Dolphins pick, because like Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, they're going to put up points, right? And it's just a matter of if their defense shows a little bit of resistance. Yeah. And then I think the Dolphins are one of them sneaky good teams. Like when I did a Dolphins game a couple of weeks ago, they blew me away with not only how well they ran the ball, but how well they played defense. And they couldn't get a victory because they didn't have a quarterback that could hit the broadside of a barn. I mean, it was so bad. You're watching dudes run around wide open all over the place with Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and they can't hit anybody. And, I think they should have won the first game. I did the game against Arizona. They should have won that game. A snap over to his head really cost him that. I think these two teams, listen, man, our Denver Broncos are sitting at 5-5. They're the 7th seed right now. If the season were to end today, the playoffs start, they're the 7th seed. But I'm a little bit nervous about them holding on to that 7th seed. And a lot of it's because of the Bengals and because of Tua and the Miami Dolphins. So we'll see exactly how that plays out.
All right. Should be a fun weekend.
Should be a great one. Hey, listen, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. Thank you for helping us grow. We really appreciate you guys. For everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth podcast, for Mike, I am Mark. We'll be back with you guys to wrap it all up and talk about week 11 next week.